Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. Imagine your child is sick for months. Something is poisoning her, but you can't figure out what it is. A test reveals it is lead, that she has 5 times the normal lead level in her blood. And the culprit, well, it appears to be a snack you've been giving her. 5 on Your Side investigated this case. Producer Pritchard Strong joins us with what they learned. Pritchard, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So this is a really scary story. This Wake Forest couple knew something was wrong. Talk about, first of all, how old this child was and what were the signs that they saw that indicated that the child was sick.
Yeah, really scary because really it doesn't sound like there were a whole lot of signs. The child was around 1 year old, and the only way that this was actually detected was because they had a blood test as part of a program where they test 1-year-olds for lead exposure, and the lead levels came back really, really high. They were somewhere 5 to 6 times what you normally want to see in a child. Very, very concerning, especially at that age.
And so they did have Wake County, I guess, test some things in their environment at first to try to find out, where this was coming from, because back in the day, lead was a common ingredient in things like paint, for example, but not so much anymore. So what were the things they were testing? Yeah,
so when the lead levels are that high, it's automatic. It goes right to the Department of Health, and they start looking into it. So they came out, they tested water, soil, air, clothing, paint, vehicles. They tested the grandparents' house in Franklin County where this child had spent a lot of time, and they really just weren't finding anything. They weren't getting anything back that was giving them any kind of indication of where this lead exposure was coming from.
And that had to be really frustrating.
Absolutely.
Especially when you have a child who is sick. Okay, we are going to talk about what they learned after the break. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about they were looking into this lead and trying to figure out where it was coming from. I think we need to point out that lead is a very serious toxin, correct? Especially when it comes to young children.
Yeah, absolutely. And there can be some common sickness signs that indicate there may be some lead poisoning. But long term, this can impact brain, nervous system development. It can slow growth and other types of development, impair behavior, speech, hearing. There are all sorts of serious long-term effects from lead exposure, lead toxicity, and those young children are just really, really vulnerable to it.
So we talked about before the break, they looked at all of the environmental things. How did they finally figure out where this was coming from?
So yeah, this was going on for months. They were in a panic. They didn't know. They weren't getting any answers from any of the testing. And then finally, October 30th, they heard about this FDA alert about Wanabana fruit pouches with applewood cinnamon. Told parents to stop giving them to their children because there was a high lead content in those pouches. And they said they knew immediately that's where it came from. They'd given their child dozens of these pouches. And they said, without question, that's where it was coming from.
And that's really terrifying. But also, I'm sure there's some guilt as a parent thinking, I'm giving this to my child and I thought it was safe. So what do we know about heavy metal contamination from spices? Is this something that the FDA has been looking at? Are they looking at other products?
Yeah. So what they've done is they've kind of narrowed it down to the cinnamon that's in that apple cinnamon puree. The company sent me a press release just a little while ago that said that they'd really ruled out some of the other ingredients and they were focusing in on the cinnamon as the potential source. Now, we spoke to Consumer Reports as well. They've done a lot of testing on spices in general, looking for heavy metals, and they are common. Spices in general are just a common source of heavy metals, including lead. They've known this for a while. They've been doing this type of testing since at least 2018. They've got articles highlighting some common foods, especially foods for young children that have higher lead and heavy metal content that should be avoided. So this is a known thing and something that a lot of people are looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sitting here thinking I've been a journalist for a very long time and I didn't know that. So this is obviously something that's important for parents to know, but I guess all of us to know that spices can contain heavy metals. So what is the family doing? Obviously, they're talking to us, so they're using the media to create some awareness about this problem, but what else are they doing?
Yeah, Keely Arthur, our 5 on Your Side reporter, had a phone conversation with the mother in this case. They are filing a class action lawsuit that they are hoping becomes class action. And really they said that this is not about the money, that this is about awareness. They're trying to get this out beyond just the FDA alert, beyond just what is being reported out there, to hopefully give parents some more knowledge about this situation and others, with spices potentially elsewhere in other foods and other heavy metals.
So what should consumers do to protect themselves?
It's just kind of being aware of what's in your food, that there are heavy metals in spices, kind of limiting that for young children and their intake. It's tough because you can't just look at a jar of cinnamon that you're cooking with and say, that's got a heavier lead content than something else. So just knowing that, going into it with the idea that you're going to limit young children's exposure and intake, and just kind of knowing what tends to have a heavier content of heavy metals than maybe some other products.
And that will be on WRAL.com.
Yes.
I'm imagining that people can look that up because I love cinnamon. I mean, cinnamon's one of my favorite things. Yeah. So it is kind of scary to hear that. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us and explaining this. And I know a lot of parents are going to really want to take in this information and learn from it. This has been the WRAL Daily Download, a production of WRAL News. Please check out my new true crime podcast from WRAL Studios. The Killing Month, August 1978, details the story of a band of outlaw brothers who silenced witnesses to stay out of prison. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download.